Hey everyone, this is Keith Schleicher from Gaming Trend and Tabletop Throwdown, and I'm here to talk to you about the Windwalker faction expansion for Cthulhu Wars. Now, if you take a look at the box of the Windwalker faction expansion, it's a rather large box. Well, it's not surprising that this is a large box because the Cthulhu Wars box is very large. If you haven't seen that thing, you could probably kill someone if you dropped it from a building. However, let's take a look at the specifics of what comes in the Windwalker expansion, and we're going to answer these three questions instead of giving the expansion a full review. We're going to tell you what the Windwalker expansion adds to the game, does it change the gameplay significantly, and who is this aimed for? So let's go ahead and take a look at the components and what the Windwalker faction is all about. So here we have the contents of the Windwalker expansion faction pack, and you're going to see Ithaca in the middle of the great old ones there, and Ithaca is just as impressive as the other ones, actually much thinner than all the other ones, but quite the tongue on them, like the lead singer of Kiss, I guess. But he's going to cause some nightmares for some people. Quite frankly, the only one that's really much taller is Cthulhu because of the wings that he has on him. But the Windwalker is definitely very well modeled, and it definitely looks like wind when you take a look at him. So let's take a look at the rest of the figures here that are included. And you are going to have 6 acolytes. So your cultists are right there. Your Wendigo are 4 right there. Those are going to cost 1 and give you a combat value of 1. Then you have your Nafka, and these are 4 right there. And their cost is going to equal to the number that are still in your unit pool. So the more you get out, the less they're going to cost. So that's something that you're going to want to take advantage of early in the game, because at first they're going to be expensive, but later on, if you keep on putting them out without getting them to be sacrificed, they're going to be less expensive to get. And then you have the 2 great old ones. You have Rantagoth, which is this giant crab-like thing. And he is going to cost 6 and give you a combat of 3. And then Ithaca, again, with the tongue there, is going to be a cost of 6 again, and it's going to have different combat values. It's going to equal half the doom total of your opponent, rounded up. So whatever their doom is, that's going to be very important, and it's going to make Ithaca probably much stronger later in the game, so you don't want to use him too quickly. So here's the faction sheet for the Windwalker faction, and it's just like the other ones. You're going to have your monsters with your different costs and combat values and different notes, your unique ability, and your spellbooks. Your setup, you get the 6 acolytes and a control gate in one of the 2 areas marked with a glyph. So you can see right here, this is for Antarctica. The other one is in the Arctic Ocean, at least on this player map, which is the world map. So your spell books, they're pretty self-explanatory. Awaken Rantagoth, so your first great old one. A gate exists in the area marked with the Windwalker glyph in which you did not start. So if you start in Antarctica, it'll be in the Arctic Ocean. You gain this one when you are the starting player. Another faction has 6 faction spell books, so you have to wait until one of the other players gets all 6 factions before you actually get all 6 of them. You can take this spellbook at any time. For each enemy player with 6 faction spellbooks, gain 1 Elder Sign. So that's going to be nice for points at the end. And then this is your final objective of awakening Ithaca. So your cultists are pretty typical. You have a cost of 1 and a combat of 0. Wendigo, cost of 1 and a combat of 1, so they will help with combat a little bit, but not very much. Then you have the Nafke, of which you have 4 of them, that their cost equals the number of Nafke in your unit pool. So if there's only 1 left, you only have to pay 1 for it. So once you start putting them out, you're going to want to put them out as quickly as you can, because the first one's going to cost 4. If it gets sacrificed, then you're going to have to pay 4 again for another one. So if it goes 4, 3, 2, 1 for those units there. And then finally, your great old ones. They both cost 6, which is actually lower than most of the great old ones for all the other factions. So you can bring them out a little bit sooner. For Ron-Tagath, you pay 6 power. Ron-Tagath appears in an area containing the Windwalker glyph, so Antarctica or the Arctic Ocean in this case. And then Eternal post-battle. If Ron-Tagath receives a pain or a kill, you may pay 1 power to cancel its effect on him. He can only receive 1 combat result per battle. So it's only 1 power to keep him out on the board, even if he gets a pain or a kill. Now, if you get a pain, you have to move away. It's not such a big deal, but kill, that's another 6 power to bring him back. That's a difference of 5 power at the end of the day. So it's definitely worthwhile to keep him out there as long as you can still hold your position in that area that you had the combat in. Then finally, you have Ithaqua. So Ron-Tagath has been awakened. Doesn't necessarily need to be in play. And then a gate must exist in an area marked with your glyph. So you don't have to control that glyph, but it has to be in there. So in this case, again, Antarctica or the Arctic Ocean. Makes sense because of the wind and the cold. And that, pay 6 power and replace the gate with Ithaqua. So even if you don't control the gate, you can still bring Ithaqua out. And if someone else actually controls that, that's going to actually cause them to lose that gate, it sounds like. I'll get a clarification on that later. Combat equals half the doom total of your opponent rounded up. So if you're going up against a very powerful opponent, you're going to get quite a lot of dice, but you're not going to get nearly as much as what they have. So if it's a smaller amount of combat, you're going to probably have a better chance at defeating them. Then Feryx, ongoing. While Ithaqua is in play, your cultists cannot be captured by enemy monsters. They're still vulnerable to enemy great old ones. So you have your monsters here, and they cannot be captured. Your acolytes or cultists, so also your high priests, cannot be captured by your monsters. So they're still susceptible to the great old ones if they're out there. But since there's only 1 or 2 for each faction, the likelihood of them getting captured while Ithaqua is out on the board is very slim. So that makes having Ithaqua out there a very powerful thing. So now let's take a look at the spell books that you can gain during the game. The first one we have here is Herald of the Outer Gods. Pay 5 power for Windwalker's Ritual of Annihilation, regardless of the position of the ritual marker. That means you can perform the Ritual of Annihilation anytime that you want. You just have to pay 5 power for it. Then you have Cannibalism. After a battle in which 1 or more enemy units were killed, spawn a Wendigo or Acolyte in that area, even if you're not involved in the battle. So if you're in an area and a battle takes place, you can still get a Wendigo or Acolyte in that area even without being involved. So that can help with gaining control of that area. Then you have Howl, which is a pre-battle condition. Before battle, if any Wendigos are present, you may force the enemy to retreat 1 unit of their choice out of the area to an adjacent area. So that's great. If you have a massive force, it may mean that an acolyte or a smaller monster may move out of the area, but still it forces them to move a unit out, and that may also cause them to not be able to use a spell book or any of their special abilities that they were planning on using. Then you have the Arctic Wind. When Ithaca moves, any or all of his units in the area can be moved with him for no additional cost. So that means that when you have him out on the board and he's surrounded by other people, he can be used with other units and move along with them. And that's no additional cost, so you can move quite a bit of units at once. Then you have an Ice Age, which is a cost 1 action. Place or move your Ice Age token to any area. When an enemy faction takes any action ending in the Ice Age area, they must pay +1 power. So you have this here, and you put it out on the board wherever you want. And if they try to move into that area, they have to pay an additional power to actually move in there. So that's something that you're going to want to consider, especially if you want to hold on to a certain area or make sure that others don't get in there. Then finally we have the Berserker Gang. Yeah, Berserker Gang. For each Nopka killed in the battle, so that's these guys here, each one that gets killed in the battle, the enemy must eliminate 1 monster or cultist. So that means that if they get killed, the other player is going to lose a unit as well. So that may mean that you might want to actually get rid of a Nopka, even if it's going to mean that they're going to cost more, because it's going to cause your opponent to actually lose a monster or a cultist as well. So there's some interesting things here. It's kind of a slow burn because there are things that aren't very useful at the beginning of the game, but later they will become very valuable. So you have to kind of be kind of like a blue player in Magic who has a bunch of different counter spells and have a lot of patience. You got to slowly build up and get a good amount of units out on the board, and then once you do, then you can go in for the attack and kill and keep your power up. That Hibernate ability is one thing that you're not going to want to forget about. You add +1 power to your total for each enemy Great Old One in play. You can take no further actions during this action phase, but then at the start of the next Gather Power phase, you don't lose any power, but you add it to your total. So if you are at a point where you don't want to actually do any more actions, then you just kind of leave your Doom as where you want, and then you're going to be able to gain more Great Old Ones, or gain more power the more Great Old Ones there are out there. Unfortunately, that's going to be better towards the end of the game when there are more Great Old Ones out there. So that's when that is going to be predominantly into effect. But that's a great power, but you're going to have to know exactly when to use it. So what does the Windwalker expansion add to the game? Well, it adds the Windwalker faction to the game. Not too surprising. So when you take a look at this faction, you're going to get 6 different spell books. 3 of them are ongoing. 1 is pre-battle, 1 post-battle, and then you have 1 action spell book. Now, a lot of these spell books are going to become more powerful towards the end of the game, so you're going to have to kind of bide your patience and make sure that you kind of lay low for a little bit. But that hibernation ability is great because then you don't have to use all of your power in the beginning parts of the game. You can actually add the power from your current turn into your next turn if you need to. That's a great ability that you're going to have to remember to use if you're playing with the Windwalker faction. So, does this add a lot of complexity to Cthulhu Wars? Not any more complexity than playing any other faction. Again, this faction does play a lot differently than the other ones because you kind of have to sit back and wait. You don't want to be on the offensive until the end of the game. But once you are ready to attack, the other players better watch out. You just have to hope that they haven't picked away at your forces every so often to make sure you don't get too full of yourself. Who is this aimed for? This is aimed for players that want to actually use that 5-player board that's included with the base game, or someone who has already played all 4 factions significantly and wants to try to change it up a little bit and maybe add this to their rotation. I really always enjoy adding new factions to games that I've already played because they bring something new and different. And as wild as the 4 factions are within Cthulhu Wars, this one definitely plays very differently from all the other ones. So this is going to have new strategies to learn and to discover as you play throughout the game. You're still going to be able to make the strategy your own because you're going to be using the spell books and putting them down in the order that you want. So that's something you're going to get. You're going to get your own style with this faction. It is retailing at $50, and it is available in the Onslaught 3 Kickstarter, so you'll definitely want to take a look at that. But for me, I always really like to add new factions, and this is the best out of the 3 recent expansions that I got for Cthulhu Wars.